Fuller was reported missing in the summer of 2022 after working a shift at GEODIS Park. You'll remember her remains were found a few weeks later in Wilson County, but it took almost a year for police to arrest suspects in this case.
She was a good girl. There's no reason why this girl should be missing or being found here in Wilson County. There's no reason to it. She comes from a good family.
22-year-old Mya Christine Fuller left home. Nobody in her family had any reason to believe they were watching her walk into the final hours of her life. Mya was young, intelligent, and still building a future. She had graduated magna cum laude from Blackman High School, played basketball, and had people at home who loved her enough to notice when something wasn't right. On July 30th, 2022, she went to work at Nashville's GEODIS Park like thousands of young people do every weekend, clocking in, finishing her responsibilities, and moving on with her day. Later that night, Mya accepted an invitation to a party. Nothing about those words sounds terrifying. A party, a social media message, a Saturday night in Nashville. The kind of decision people make every weekend without thinking it could be the last place anyone would ever see them alive. But Mya never made it home. Her dark gray Toyota Camry was later found near the nightclub on Antioch Pike where authorities established she had been that night. The car was still there. Mya wasn't. And for her family, that parked car must have represented something unbearable. Proof that she had arrived somewhere. But no answer for where she had gone afterward. The calls went unanswered. The hours became days, and the people who loved Mya were left in the cruelest place a family can be, knowing something was wrong while still not knowing exactly what had happened. Then, on August 6th, human remains were discovered on rural property in Wilson County, miles away from where Mya's car had been left. Days later, authorities confirmed the devastating truth. The remains belonged to Mya Fuller. She was never coming home. Years later, prosecutors would finally reveal more about how that ordinary-looking invitation became part of something violent. They said Tyshawn Bowles had located Mya on social media and invited her to the party while knowing his sister, Tiana Tipton, intended to assault her. What followed went far beyond a confrontation. According to prosecutors, Mya was assaulted, placed inside the trunk of a vehicle, driven out of Nashville and into Wilson County. There, prosecutors said, Tiana Tipton shot Mya 7 times. Investigators recovered 7 shell casings. 7 shots that ended the life of a 22-year-old woman whose family had been expecting her to come back. And maybe that is what makes Mya's story so difficult to shake. There was no long history between her and the people eventually charged in connection with her death. Investigators said they had only become acquainted within roughly 24 hours. One brief connection. One invitation, one night, and a family that would never be the same again. So how did Mya Fuller go from finishing a normal workday in Nashville to being found dead miles away in Wilson County? And what finally led investigators to the people responsible? To answer that, you have to go back one more day, Friday, July 29, 2022. According to the Wilson County Sheriff's Office, that was the last day Mya's family saw her. An ordinary Friday night in Murfreesboro, a college town about 35 minutes southeast of Nashville. Her family would later tell investigators she kept in touch. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should, because it becomes the reason anyone knew to worry. Somewhere in those same hours, according to a news release later issued by the Tennessee District Attorney's General Conference, Mya had a disagreement with a 21-year-old Nashville woman named Tiana Tipton. Here is what the public record says about that disagreement. That is nearly all of it. Prosecutors have described it as an altercation, a dispute, a disagreement. No one has publicly explained what was said, what started it, or what either woman walked away believing. In the months after Mya's death, detectives told reporters they had not identified a motive. Years later, after every case had resolved, that answer still had not been made public. So the honest version is this. Something happened on a Friday night between 2 young women who, according to investigators, had only just met. And whatever it was, Mya appears to have treated it as finished. Because the next morning she went to work. Saturday, July 30th. Mya worked an event at GEODIS Park, home of Nashville SC, the soccer stadium south of downtown. Thousands of people moved through that building on an event day. She was one of the people who made it run. Evidence presented in court later indicated that after her shift, Mya drove home to Murfreesboro. Think about the shape of that day for a second. Not what she was thinking. No one can tell you that, and anyone who claims to is guessing. Just the shape. Work. The drive back down I-24. Home. Getting ready for a Saturday night out. The Wilson County Sheriff's Office would later describe what she was wearing, because at the time they described it, they were asking the public to help find her. Jeans, a shirt, bright pink Puma sneakers. That is the kind of detail that stays with you. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's so specific and so young. It's what a 22-year-old wears when she's going out and wants to be comfortable. While Mya was working that shift, prosecutors say something else was happening. At the plea hearings that would come years later, prosecutors laid out that Tyshawn Bowles, Tiana Tipton's 20-year-old brother, had learned about the altercation between his sister and Mya. Prosecutors said he then searched social media until he found Mya's profile and invited her to a party that night, knowing that his sister planned to assault her. Bowles had never met Mya. She had never done anything to him. In an interview with police, Bowles acknowledged inviting Mya to the party. He denied knowing of any plan to kidnap or kill her. That distinction between what he admitted and what he denied would eventually shape how the courts treated him, and it would become one of the hardest things Mya's family had to sit through. But on that Saturday night, none of it was visible. A message came in about a party. It came from someone with no obvious connection to a disagreement from the night before, and the party was at a club, Island Vibes, on Antioch Pike near Harding Place in South Nashville, a public place. Doors, staff, cameras, other people. Prosecutors said Mya arrived at approximately 11:14 p.m. 11:14, not around 11. Not late. A logged, documented minute in the last night of her life. What happened after she got there is where the public record narrows to only what prosecutors and one defendant have said aloud in a courtroom. According to prosecutors, at some point, Mya left the club and went out into the parking lot with Tipton. And in that lot, prosecutors said, she was attacked by Tipton and by a third defendant, 20-year-old Lamyra Pipkins, also identified in court records as Lamyra Dixon. Prosecutors said that at the conclusion of the assault, Tipton put Mya into the trunk of her car and drove away with her. Bowles, according to officials, admitted he watched the beating. He said he heard his sister say, "Pop the trunk." He denied seeing Mya placed into the vehicle. He said he followed his sister's car and then lost sight of it. Nobody has publicly said how long any of it took. Nobody has publicly described what Mya said or did or tried. Those gaps are real, and they should stay gaps. What is documented is what stayed behind. Her dark gray 2020 Toyota Camry sat in the lot near Island Vibes. She had parked it herself, a few hours earlier, on a Saturday night, expecting to drive it home. She never came back for it. By the time the sun came up on July 31st, Mya's family was calling a phone that wasn't being answered. She was reported missing, and the Wilson County Sheriff's Office, along with agencies in 3 other counties, began working a case that would eventually stretch across 4 jurisdictions. Investigators would later say they had multiple sources confirming Mya's presence at that location, and multiple types of surveillance video supporting their case. They had a club full of people. They had cameras. They had a car sitting in a parking lot like a marker on a map. And still, almost a full year would pass before anyone was arrested for what happened to Mya Fuller. 7 days. That's how long Mya Fuller's family spent making phone calls, checking with friends, and trying to hold on to the possibility that there was still an ordinary explanation. On August 6, 2022, that possibility ended. The property was on Trammell Lane, in the southeastern corner of Wilson County, rural land under development, well outside Nashville. According to a person connected to the property who later spoke to reporters, it started with a smell, something strange in the air. There were buzzards circling. The initial thought was an animal. Then someone walked down off the side of a hill and saw a pair of tennis shoes. Remember what the Wilson County Sheriff's Office had told the public Mya was wearing. Jeans, a shirt, bright pink Puma sneakers. Wilson County deputies responded to the report of human remains found in a wooded area. The medical examiner later confirmed the remains were Mya Fuller's. and determined she died of multiple gunshot wounds. She had been found roughly 30 miles from where her car was still parked. For her family, one unbearable question was answered and replaced immediately by a worse one. They knew where she was. They did not know who had done this, or why, or whether anyone ever would. And here is where this case becomes genuinely difficult. Not emotionally, though it is that too, but procedurally. Whoever was responsible had moved her. Mya was last seen in Davidson County. She lived in Rutherford County. She was found in Wilson County. That meant no single agency owned the case. Investigators would eventually say the work spanned 4 counties, pulling in the Wilson County Sheriff's Office, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, Metro Nashville Police, Rutherford County, Mount Juliet Police, and the 15th Judicial District Attorney's Office. Evidence in a case like that doesn't sit in one place. It's a club parking lot in South Nashville, a stretch of undeveloped land in Wilson County, phone records, vehicles, cameras owned by businesses that have no idea they recorded anything important. 10 days after she was found, on August 16th, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office issued a press release and announced a reward of up to $1,000 for information. Nothing broke. So the Sheriff's Office called a press conference. If you ever watch the video of it, the thing that stands out isn't the podium or the microphones. It's the row of people standing behind the sheriff. Captain Scott Moore, the Public Information Officer, Detective Sergeant Walker Woods, Detective Travis Darnell, Major B.J. Stafford from Criminal Investigations, District Attorney General Jason Lawson, an attorney named Brian Lewis, representing the Fuller family, and Mr. and Mrs. Fuller. Mya's parents were in the room. They had requested no media contact. They were not there to be interviewed. They were there because it was their daughter's name on the case. The sheriff spoke about Mya as a young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. He addressed whoever was responsible directly, saying they would be found. And then he said the thing that reveals what a stalled investigation actually feels like from the inside, that they were asking for help from members of the public who knew something but had been hesitant to come forward. That is a sentence you only say when you believe people are out there staying quiet. The sheriff's office raised the reward that day from $1,000 to up to $5,000. Then Brian Lewis stepped up and explained what Mya's family and friends had done on their own. People across the United States had contributed to a private reward fund. They had raised $16,000. Combined with the sheriff's office and Crime Stoppers money, the total stood at roughly $21,100. $21,000, assembled by people who loved a 22-year-old woman, offered to a stranger in exchange for a sentence. When reporters pushed for details that day, investigators held the line. Asked about persons of interest, Major Stafford said detectives were pursuing multiple leads, technological and conventional, and were talking to people, but could not discuss anyone specific without damaging the integrity of the investigation. Asked whether they only knew Mya had been at Island Vibes because of the car, investigators revealed something more. They said they had multiple sources confirming that location beyond the vehicle. They called it a very important location in the timeline leading up to her death and asked anyone who had contact with her that evening to come forward. Asked whether there was video of her leaving with someone. That question got no answer at all. And when a reporter asked Brian Lewis what Mya was actually like, he described a young woman who was attentive, tender-hearted, kind, loving, someone with a bright future ahead of her. That was the fall of 2022. Then the case went quiet in public for months, but it did not go quiet inside the sheriff's office. As Detective Sergeant Woods later put it, a long-term investigation like this one naturally has major breaks at different points along the way. One of those came on January 17th, when search warrants were obtained for multiple suspects. That is the moment the case turned, and it's worth noticing how unglamorous it is. No confession, no dramatic confrontation, a judge signing paperwork that allowed detectives to go get things they had been building a case for months to justify taking. Woods would later tell reporters something that explains a lot about how this case was solved. He pointed out that we live in a time when there is video footage. Investigators said they had multiple different types of surveillance video supporting the case. 6 more months passed. Then, in July 2023, nearly 1 year to the day since deputies found Mya on that property, A Wilson County grand jury returned indictments. 3 people, all from Nashville, none of them older than 21. Tiana Tipton, 21. Tyshawn Bowles, 20. Lamyra Pipkins, 20. The charges were serious and layered. All 3 were charged with first-degree murder in perpetration of a kidnapping. Tipton and Bowles faced additional counts including kidnapping and first-degree murder, and abuse of a corpse was among the charges filed in the case. Pipkins, identified in later proceedings under the last name Dixon, faced an additional kidnapping count. All 3 were held in the Wilson County Jail without bond. At the press conference announcing the arrests, investigators said something that reframed everything the public thought it understood about the case. This was not an ongoing relationship. These parties, they said, did not know each other. There was no long-running feud, no history, no pattern of conflict. According to investigators, these individuals had become acquainted over the course of roughly the previous 24 hours. 24 hours from strangers to a homicide. Asked whether prosecutors would seek the death penalty, District Attorney Jason Lawson would only say that at that time, all options would be considered fairly, and asked about motive. The one thing Mya's family had been waiting a year to understand. Investigators said it remained among the unanswered questions. They had names, they had faces, they had 3 people in custody. They still could not tell a mother why. On July 20th, 2023, all 3 defendants appeared in Wilson County Criminal Court for their first proceedings since the arrests. All 3 pleaded not guilty. A tentative trial date was set for July 2024, and even that came with a caveat, because if the defendants were tried separately, only one of them would face a jury that week. So after 12 months of waiting, the Fuller family was told to wait again. What none of them knew yet was that not a single one of these 3 cases would ever reach a jury, and that when the resolutions finally came, they would arrive years apart, in 3 very different sizes, and leave Mya's family feeling like the system had measured their daughter's life 3 separate times and gotten 3 different answers. On March 11, 2025, Tiana Tipton walked into a Wilson County courtroom for what was supposed to be a readiness hearing. Her trial was 1 week away. Jury selection was days out. Instead, she pleaded guilty to everything. District Attorney Jason Lawson said afterward that the plea had not been communicated to his office in any way, that they had been fully prepared to go to trial the following week and reach that same result through a jury. Judge Brody Kane sentenced her immediately. Life in prison for first-degree premeditated murder. A second life sentence for felony first-degree murder. Because both involved the same victim, the sentences would merge into one. For the first time since July 2022, the Fuller family had something solid. The person prosecutors said put Mya in that trunk and fired 7 times had admitted it in open court and would not be walking out. But 2 cases were still open. 19 months later, October 14, 2025, Tyshawn Bowles took his turn. He did not plead guilty to murder. He pleaded guilty to facilitation of especially aggravated kidnapping. He was sentenced to 12 years. At that hearing, prosecutors laid out what he had done. He learned about the altercation between Mya and his sister. He searched social media until he found Mya. He invited her to a party knowing his sister planned to assault her. In an interview with police, he acknowledged the invitation, but denied knowing about any plan to kidnap or kill her. He admitted watching the beating. He said he heard his sister say, "Pop the trunk." He denied seeing Mya put into the vehicle and said he followed the car and lost sight of it. District Attorney Lawson explained the reasoning publicly. He said that in criminal cases, people sometimes have different levels of involvement and responsibility, that the plea reflected Bowles's level of involvement. He invited her there, so he bore responsibility. But the evidence, Lawson said, did not show he intended or participated in her death. That is the legal logic. Whatever you think of it, it is coherent, and it is how facilitation charges are meant to work. It also meant that the person who found Mya online, the reason she went anywhere that night at all, received the lightest sentence of the 3. Mya's family did not accept it. They said publicly that they felt betrayed. And in that courtroom, Mya's mother spoke. She said her daughter just went to a party. She said it more than once, because it is the entire case in 5 words. She spoke about Mya being the light in her eyes and the light in her family's eyes. She said Mya did not deserve what happened to her, that it was despicable then and remained despicable. She addressed the reality that people had defended the person who invited her daughter out that night. And she named the thing that no legal reasoning can soften, that someone stood there, walked away, and never called the police. Then she said the number out loud, 12 years. There was still one case left, Lamyra Pipkins, who court records identify as Lamyra Dixon, held out the longest. Her trial had been set for November 2025, then pushed. On a Monday in March 2026, the morning jury selection was scheduled to begin. She pleaded guilty to facilitation of first-degree murder. 20 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction, and with that, it was over. 3 defendants, 3 guilty pleas. Not one jury ever seated. Look at how it landed. Tipton, who prosecutors said fired 7 shots, life. Dixon, who prosecutors said helped attack Mya in that parking lot, 20 years. Bowles, who prosecutors said found her online and brought her there, 12. 3 people, 1 young woman. 3 completely different answers to the question of what her life was worth. And after 4 years of hearings, filings, and pleas, one question was never publicly answered. Why? Prosecutors described a disagreement, an altercation, a dispute. Nobody has ever explained what it was about. Detectives said early on they had not identified a motive, and by the time the last case closed, the public still had nothing. Investigators had said these 3 didn't know Mya, that they had all become acquainted within about 24 hours. So the record now holds a complete account of how Mya Fuller died, and no account at all of why. Her family has the sentences. They do not have the reason. Here is what I keep returning to. Mya Fuller was 22. She had graduated magna cum laude. She played basketball. She worked. She was, by her family's account, tender-hearted and kind and had a bright future ahead of her. Her mother called her the light in her eyes and meant it literally. On a Saturday in July, she finished a shift at GEODIS Park, drove home to Murfreesboro, and got dressed. Jeans, a shirt, bright pink Puma sneakers. She pulled into a parking lot on Antioch Pike at 11:14 at night, at a club, in a city she knew, on a weekend, at an age when saying yes to a party is the most normal thing in the world. She did nothing wrong. That is the part that should never get lost in the charges and the sentence lengths and the plea agreements. Mya Fuller did not make a reckless choice. She accepted an invitation. Millions of people do it every single weekend and go home afterward. Her car sat in that lot for 7 days waiting for her. If Mya's story stayed with you, do something small for her. Subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell, so cases like hers don't disappear the way this one nearly did. A year of local coverage, 3 quiet pleas, and almost no national attention for a 22-year-old woman who deserved every bit of it. And leave a comment, because I want to hear this one. Tyshawn Bowles never touched her. He sent a message. He watched. He walked away without calling anyone. For that, he received 12 years. Less than the woman who helped beat her, and a fraction of the woman who pulled the trigger. So here's the question. If the invitation is the only reason she was ever there, if none of it happens without that one message, is 12 years justice? Or is the law simply not built to measure what a person does when they set something in motion and then decide not to look at where it goes? Rest in peace, Mya Christine Fuller, 22 years old, a daughter, a friend, a young woman who just went to a party.